Defending Israel with David Harris is made possible in part by Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Paul and Lynn Light Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation.
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and welcome back to Defending Israel. Nearly 2 years ago, JBS first approached me and asked me to do this weekly show which they chose to call Defending Israel. And for regular viewers, you'll remember that on a number of occasions I used this opportunity to say to you, the JBS national and global audience, we need a post-October 7th playbook to address the current challenges. And the problem is that too many were stuck in an October 6th playbook. And even nearly 2 years later, some of those very same organizations and individuals still refuse to believe that we're in a new world, and a new world requires a new strategy. Some people I was recently speaking with said, David, there's too much attention to the current situation. It'll all go back to the way it was once the war is over, or once Prime Minister Netanyahu is no longer the leader, or perhaps once President Trump is no longer sitting in the Oval Office. They want to cling to the belief that they can return to what's called the status quo ante, the pre-October 7th world. I don't believe they're right, nor do I believe that those institutions, Jewish institutions, advocacy institutions, that are charged with defending the Jewish people have made the necessary adjustments to face the post-October 7th world. So I'd like to use this opportunity during this program to talk once again about what needs to be done, what's different, and to do so as the summer recedes. We enter the month of September with Jewish holidays around the corner, and when the most number of Jews at any time of the year show up in Jewish spaces and places, particularly in synagogues during the Chagim, the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What we're facing, I believe, and I've said before, so forgive me for regular listeners for repeating myself, but it bears mentioning again, is something very different. In a way, one might say that if there was a holiday from history, so to speak, in recent decades for Jews, especially in liberal democratic societies like the United States, that holiday is over. The notion that Holocaust education, Holocaust consciousness, Holocaust museums and memorials and commemorations would somehow protect Jews against any resurgence of serious anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is rapidly receding. Of course, we continue to need Holocaust education. How could we not? But for those who believed there was some kind of insurance policy, or for those, for that matter, who believed that liberal democracy itself, that America was an exceptional country, or in the same company, Canada, Australia, Britain, in their current incarnations, were exceptional countries and could provide Jews with full equality before the law, full equality of opportunity, full protection. We're now beginning to see that liberal democracy itself is not a surefire formula for ensuring the well-being, safety, and protection of Jews. We've seen something radically different. And no, I don't believe it's going away anytime soon. What we've seen is something more structural, more systemic, a kind of seismic change in the way Jews are viewed, in the way the state of Israel is being depicted. And though to many of us, myself included. The events of October 7th are as vivid today as they were nearly 2 years ago, and as clear in who was the perpetrator and who was the victim, who was on the right side of history and who was on the wrong side of history. Those views are not universally shared, and as was predicted here on this show nearly 2 years ago, with the passage of time, more and more people have chosen to forget what October 7th was all about, have chosen to forget the true nature of Hamas and its genocidal ideology, have chosen to forget the central role of Iran as the head of the snake in supporting Hamas and its kindred cousins in Lebanon, Hezbollah, in Yemen, the Houthis, and elsewhere in the region. They've conveniently chosen to forget, and more, as we've seen, institutions that we've once had great confidence in, universities, media outlets, human rights organizations, have one by one left us in the dust, turned against us, inverted history, chosen to forget the precipitating factors of October the 7th, and instead have narrowed the lens to look at Israel and Israel alone, and to do so in a way that to many of us, not just friends of Israel, but friends of what we believe to be the truth, a set of facts, in a way that is completely unrecognizable. And yet, as we face these, as I call them, structural and systemic changes, too many Jewish organizations that call themselves advocacy institutions are still playing the October 6th playbook. Well, if we have one more meeting with a university official and tell them how bad anti-Semitism is, they'll wake up and they'll figure it out for themselves and they'll act appropriately. If we put one more billboard along a busy highway with some clever phraseology, we'll change people's minds. If we talk about how bad hate is in a multi-million-dollar 30-second ad during the Super Bowl or another big event in American television, we'll win back the American people. Those are all well-intentioned, but I don't think they're sufficient, not even close. Look, we are dealing with, for one thing, penetration into American higher education and increasingly into American elementary and secondary education, and on a big scale. Some people, again, want to pretend that's not happening, that it's the stuff of conspiracy theories, but the reality is, and I especially applaud the work of the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, of ISCAP, an organization that I joined some 2 years ago because I believed in their work. ISCAP has been talking about those three words, follow the money. It was saying it for years, even before October the 7th, when many people were not listening or simply cavalierly dismissing it, wanting to pretend that their hallowed alma maters were every bit as safe and welcoming as they had always been. But something had changed. Money talks, and money was flowing. And as ISCAP has shown, and others have confirmed, Qatar, a tiny state thousands of miles away from America's shores, with fewer than 350,000 citizens, has become the top foreign donor to American higher education. And I ask, not for the first time, why? Why is Qatar interested in the teaching of architecture, French literature, sociology, anthropology, chemistry, physics? Why? And I have to ask, as we look at young Americans, both in college today and after college, people who are prepared, for example, to support actively, energetically, a Zohran Mamdani to be the next mayor of the largest city in the United States and the largest Jewish community anywhere in the world outside the state of Israel, what have they been educated to believe? What have they been socially conditioned to understand? And I think we have to recognize that the money from Qatar and those with the same mindset as Qatar was not given beneficently, unselfishly. It was given with a purpose. And the purpose was in a very sophisticated, elegant, long-term, unnoisy way to win the hearts and minds of young Americans, future, not just citizens, but leaders in American industry, politics, the media, culture. And now we see as well through the work of ISCAP that those efforts by Qatar have focused as well on K through 12, a program called the Choices Program, which had the validation of Brown University, was also geared towards winning the hearts and minds of young people as young as kindergarten through 12th grade. And again, it's done in a very subtle way. It's not done in a blatant, in-your-face kind of way. It's done with a long-term strategy. And clearly, it seems to be working. Thousands of American school districts have adopted the Choices program with its curriculum about the Middle East. And again, given its sponsorship, don't for a single moment choose to believe that Qatar is uninterested in outcomes. It's very interested in outcomes. Indeed, Qatar, if you follow it closely, as ISCAP has tried to do for years, and issuing periodic reports that reveal astonishing things, Qatar has achieved extraordinary penetration in American politics, in both political parties, in American economy, in American culture, in American higher education and secondary education, elementary education, as I said, and similarly in Europe. And Qatar is drawing upon the wellspring of the Muslim Brotherhood, another name that we need to understand, the Muslim Brotherhood. And no, as I've said before, this is not a Muslim equivalent of a fraternal organization like a Greek sorority or fraternity, or for that matter, B'nai B'rith. The Muslim Brotherhood, nearly a century old, has an ideology. It wants to destroy Israel since its rebirth in 1948. It is anti-Semitic to its core. It wants to replace nation states with an Islamic caliphate. And ultimately, it wants to extend its reach into Europe and North America. And it's doing so in a century-long project. And the results are there for all to see already after a couple of decades. And if you go to the ISCAP website and read their reports on Canada, on the United States, or if you look at the leaked report of French intelligence on the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe, you'll see the inroads that have been made. And yet, I know of Jewish advocacy organizations that refuse to discuss the Muslim Brotherhood because of an unwillingness to discuss anything with the name Muslim in it for fear of disrupting relations with their Muslim friends and partners, or worse, of being called racist or Islamophobic. I know of Jewish advocacy organizations that claim to have some diplomatic ties with Qatar, or their lay leaders have business interests in Qatar through financial arrangements, and therefore are unwilling to even discuss the role of Qatar. Is this serious advocacy in the world in which we live, when some Jewish organizations will not even address the heart of the matter? Or what about universities themselves and holding them accountable? Again, too many of the marquee advocacy organizations have tried that old approach, as I mentioned. Let's get access to the leader of the university. Let's assemble a delegation that might include some alumni or donors from that university. And let's go talk in the language of reason, a six-letter word to which we all attach such importance. If only we can sit together with university leaders and reason with them as reasonable people about the dangers of anti-Semitism, the failure to protect Jewish students or faculty on campus, they'll get the message, we can work together, and we can solve the problem. And yet, too often what we found is reason no longer works. Tragically, I wish it did. I'm a great believer in reason as a pillar of liberal democracy. But it no longer works. Those Jewish organizations were being played for naive, well-intentioned people by university leaders. So along came different groups, not the marquee institutions, but new startup organizations, organizations with names like the National Jewish Advocacy Center, organizations like the Lawfare Project, organizations like the Brandeis Center for Justice, organizations like the International Legal Forum, and then individuals, young Jews, proud, determined, courageous young Jews, Jews like Sabrina Sofer at George Washington University, Shabbos Kestenbaum at Harvard University, and so many others who said, you know what, reason won't do it, niceties won't do it. The only thing our universities seem to understand is reputational damage, legal action, and financial consequences. And so these individuals and these organizations got together and said, we're going to replace reason with lawfare. And those organizations need to be applauded and supported for doing the work. And then we have the issue, again, of advocacy organizations too often so hostile, despite their so-called nonpartisan label, to the Trump administration, that even when the Trump administration tries to do something to combat anti-Semitism here at home, on the university campuses in particular, instead of joining forces and supporting these efforts and working with those involved, too often those marquee institutions are keeping the administration at arm's length because there are too many suspicions of underlying motives and all the rest. Look, I've said before, I have 50 years of work in Jewish advocacy to prove the point. I'm a nonpartisan. My late mother, who passed away nearly 7 years ago, went to her grave never knowing how I voted. I believe that as a Jewish advocate, it was not meant to be as a Democrat or Republican. It was meant to be to ask at any given moment what's best for the Jewish people and to pursue it. If it was with an administration, great. If it was opposed to administration, to oppose it, but to do so in a way that kept the door open because there would be another issue and another issue to follow. And yet, again, I see how many organizations and how many individuals in our deeply polarized American society today are unwilling to fully cooperate or even have the opportunity because they've burned their bridges with the administration. So as one professional said to me the other day, you know, for years we tried to address campus anti-Semitism. The Biden administration often said the right thing, but rarely did the right thing. Now we have a different administration. Whether one voted for it or not is not the issue. The issue is that they're trying to confront the issue of anti-Semitism on American campuses. And instead of being with them, we're creating new obstacles for them where we can, with challenges to human rights, civil rights, so forth and so on. Again, I think we need to rethink in our post-October 7th world. Or how about the United Nations? How about the role of people like Francesca Albanese, a name that probably is known to you by now, who holds a special title at the United Nations, despite the efforts of the current U.S. administration to strip her of that title, so far, unfortunately, unsuccessfully, and who goes around parading the fact that Israel is deliberately imposing starvation, is pursuing a policy of genocide, is targeting children, and all of the other, and let me choose the words carefully, the other blood libels spewing out of her mouth. And meanwhile, being given a platform at major American and other universities and other prestigious forums. And here, I give a big shout out to the work, not of the marquee institutions in the United States, but of United Nations Watch, UN Watch. Its director, Hillel Neuer, has been a guest on Defending Israel, and UN Watch has made it a point, again and again and again, not just to call out Francesca Albanese or to call her the anti-Semite or anti-Zionist that they believe her to be with good cause, but to document it in rigorous fashion, in unassailable fashion. Bravo to UN Watch for taking this on. It's these kinds of institutions that are stepping up in the advocacy space, that are making a difference. Are you a subscriber to Future of Jewish? If not, I urge you to become a subscriber. It's easy, look it up. Its founder and editor is Joshua Hoffman. Rarely have I seen more hard-hitting, straight-on, spot-on columns on the current situation facing Israel post-October 7th and the challenges facing Jews around the world. Joshua Hoffman does not mince words. He says what needs to be said. And he says it in a way that too few others, especially in those well-known advocacy institutions, are doing. I look to the Singer Foundation, the Paul Singer Foundation, for their morning informational email. If you're not getting it, you should be getting it. On telling us what we need to know. Again, they're stepping in and they're filling a vacuum in good quality information that we all need. Information that is not chosen because it either fully supports or opposes a pre-digested point of view, but things that they believe all of us who care about the well-being of Israel, of the U.S.-Israel alliance, of American and world Jewry, what we need to be reading and what we need to be knowing. They're filling a vacuum. I tip my hat to those companies like Oracle and Palantir. And yes, a member of my family works for Palantir, so I don't want anyone to think that there's some conflict of interest. But there is a sense of admiration that these companies too have stepped into the vacuum and have proudly stood up for Israel. I recall the full-page ad that Palantir took out some time ago after October 7th with 4 words on a full page in the leading newspapers: "We stand with Israel." I recall the work of Palantir at the World Economic Forum and the Munich Security Forum, 2 of the most prestigious global gatherings of world leaders and influentials, in which they brought hostage families, even though the organizers might not have been so keen at those conferences to see the hostage families. But these companies were saying, we're not going to allow the world to forget, and we're not going to allow the economic and corporate powerhouses to ignore. We have values, and we're wearing our values on our sleeve as well. So what I'm saying is, in this new world in which Jews, friends of Israel, have been blindsided, ambushed by not just a new wave, but the intensity, and even in some respects, as we've seen, the deadliness of this new wave of anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism and anti-Semitism, there are people, institutions, corporations, foundations that have woken up, that have been created, that have stood up, that stand up, that are doing remarkable things. And I also want to put in a plug for another aspect of what I believe we need to be doing at this point. And especially as we approach the high holidays, when, as I mentioned at the outset, the synagogues are filled. We need our rabbis, our clergy, the lay leaders of our synagogues, not to duck the tough issues, not to revert to conversations that are easy, but to talk about Zionism, to talk about its meaning, not just its meaning in contemporary political terms, but its deeper meaning, that those of us who are Zionists, and I have been a lifelong Zionist, do so in a firm belief that our identity as Jews is inextricably linked to a land. That land is not called Belarus or Ukraine or Poland. It's not called Lebanon or Syria or Morocco or Iraq. It's called Israel. It's called Judea. It has as its central focus Jerusalem. And that we have to understand proudly the roots of Zionism, the links between our identity and the state, and not recoil from or apologize for or back away from that embrace of Zionism. And within that, our broader sense of confidence and pride in being Jewish. We have to give more content, more meaning, more purpose, more understanding. Not just to our young people, though, yes, to our young people, but to all of us, the parents of the young people, the grandparents, the Jewish communities at large. Because I see, as I'm sure you see, that post-October 7th, while some people have remarkably stepped up, all ages and stages in life from all around the world have gone to Israel to volunteer, have organized events, meetings, have been active on social media, have supported organizations that are doing the heavy lifting, that are philanthropically assisting Israel in countless ways. Others who should be with us on the front lines are missing. They're not sure. They're hesitant. Maybe Francesca Albanese is right. Maybe that picture on the New York Times front page about the starving child really was a starving child when it wasn't, but maybe it was. They're hesitant, and we need to address that hesitation and overcome it. And now is the perfect time as the new season begins and as we gather and think about who we are as Jews and what we stand for. This is the moment. And finally, before wrapping up, I want to say a word of appreciation, yes, to JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service. JBS approached me 2 years ago and said, David, join us, talk to our audience. I considered it an honor and a privilege. What would we do without JBS? Where else can we have 24/7 programming that addresses all of these issues, that educates us about our Jewish identity, about our Zionist identity, about current issues, and brings on guests who are the polar opposite of the Francesca Albanese's and those others of her ilk, but here on JBS. So at this moment in time in our post-October 7th world, my plea is for us to understand things have changed, but we're up to the task. And there are existing and new institutions and individuals, young and old, who are facing the challenges with extraordinary courage, creativity, and vision. They need to be supported. They need to be thanked. And this is my opportunity to thank them all. This is David Harris, defending Israel, and looking forward to seeing you again next week.